Welcome to the general session of CCAC's Search Committee course, which includes an overview for the Search Committee process. I'm Valerie Keebler, Director of Faculty and Staff Development. Additional sessions covering more detail on specific aspects of the search process are available for view after this intro session. At the end of this session, participants will become familiar with the policy approved by the Board of Trustees on June 5, 2014, learn the steps taken by CCAC to attract, identify, and hire well-qualified and diverse candidates, be introduced to the applicant screening form and other documentation used in the process. At the conclusion of the course, participants are named to an active search committee and will be eligible to obtain the appropriate access code and password from the hiring manager to access the job application website. This code usually consists of the letters GU and a 4 or 5-digit number. The code will allow access to data for a single job search. To accompany this presentation, a PDF document has been created which includes the policy, timelines, question lists, and other helpful resources. Please take a moment and either print out the documentation if you prefer to have a hard copy, or open the document in a window so you can refer to the document as this session progresses. Please pause the video if you need time to access the document. To differentiate the documents, one for the session has been named A, B, C, and D. Document A is a copy of the board-approved policy. Document B is titled Hiring Guidelines. Document C is a sample of questions on the topic of diversity, and Document D covers the computer access procedures. Thank you for agreeing to serve, or potentially serve, on a search committee. The process that CCAC has adopted is thorough and can become lengthy. It's hopeful that your committee will be able to conduct the search in a timely way to interview and select the most qualified candidate. The next portion of the training will be conducted by Simona Mizrazetz, representing the Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion, or OIDI.
The purpose of the Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion teaming up with Human Resources in the development and delivery of this training is to better ensure equitable hiring practices. Equitable hiring practices enable all candidates to receive an equal opportunity and to be treated with dignity and respect. All search committee members should be familiar with the college's non-discrimination policy. I will now cover some of the equitable hiring practices that we have adopted to ensure that everybody is receiving fair and equitable treatment. All full-time and part-time benefited positions are marketed nationally to expand and diversify our applicant pools. This is a blind search process where personal candidate demographics are not shared with search committee members. Remember, hiring decisions cannot be based on any protected classifications such as age, race, ethnicity, gender, disability status, or etc. Please again refer to our non-discrimination policy. All search committee members must review all applications, regardless of the number of active applicants in the pool. This ensures equitable assessment of candidates by all search committee members. Search committees must have diverse representation. Search committee compositions must be submitted to OIDI and HR for approval. OIDI can assist in identifying potential search committee members for you. We retain a volunteer list in our office. Search committees should also incorporate diversity-related or diversity-themed questions into their set of questions for candidates. Sample diversity-related questions are available in the supplemental materials. OIDI can assist the committee with developing discipline-specific or position-related diversity questions if the sample questions are not sufficient. Let me now describe the applicant pool review process. Human Resources and OIDI review the percentage of diverse candidates in an applicant pool to ensure that there is sufficient diversity representation. Sufficient representation is determined by comparing the aggregate percentage of self-identified diverse candidates in a pool with national and local labor market statistics. If a pool is not sufficiently diverse, HR and OIDI have the authority to suspend a search and make additional marketing efforts to expand and diversify the pool. Once a pool is approved to move forward, the search committee members will receive a guest user password to review the applications. I would like to now talk about objective documentation. Do not document any personal demographics of candidates, regardless of self-identification or self-disclosure by the candidate. Self-disclosure of any protected classification cannot exclude a candidate from the search process. We will continue our session by introducing the employment laws and regulations as included in your accompanying document B, the hiring guidelines in section 2. We will not read through the laws as part of the session. However, you may refer back to this document, which includes summaries of employment laws and regulations as needed. I will now turn it back to Valerie Keebler for the remainder of the training. Thank you for your participation.
Pages 5 through 9 of the hiring guidelines document include the recruitment, search, and selection policy, which was approved by the CCAC Board of Trustees in June 2014. This document guides our practices for the search process. Searches require confidentiality of the committee members during and after the process. Please limit discussions about the search and candidates to only those on your committee, HR, or the administrators in the chain of command for the hiring department. When discussing any personal information about a candidate, speak either face-to-face or on a confidential phone call where others not involved in the search will not overhear. Email and voicemail are not to be used when discussing individual candidates. A broad overview of the hiring process covered in the policy is: a position is identified by need, and appropriate and adequate funding is approved for the position. Recruiting is initiated by a request to HR by the hiring administrator. A minimum of a 5-person search committee, which has been selected to represent the diversity of CCAC, is recommended by the hiring administrator and approved by both HR and the Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion. Full-time faculty searches shall be formed per the CBA. Positions are posted in accordance with all provisions of the collective bargaining agreement. Further information about the process for employees to apply for open positions can be found in the policy. As Sumana mentioned earlier, the postings are done on a national level, and the pool of applicants are reviewed by HR and OIDI prior to the start of the committee applicant review process. Applications for each position are held in our hiring website and able to be accessed by committee members with a unique username and password. This process will be described in detail in the next session of the course. The search process is dictated by the position. For all searches, a telephone interview is optional to narrow the pool of applicants. A face-to-face interview with the entire committee is required. Depending on the level of position, testing or additional face-to-face interviews may be required. Once a final selection has been made, a letter of recommendation is written, references checked, and a signed background check form and other necessary documentation is forwarded to the HR department. HR initiates the background check process and forwards the documentation to the college president. The college president approves the hiring and advises HR. HR contacts the successful applicant and advises them of their status and the next steps required. HR contacts the hiring administrator when the steps have been taken. We will take a more in-depth look at this process in the next few slides. Questions will be created for each round of interviews. The questions should address situational behaviors and focus on the ideal qualifications. Once the committee has created the questions for each round, the questions should be forwarded to HR and OIDI for approval. Please note that according to the policy, during all interviews, only predefined and follow-up questions that directly result from candidate responses will be asked. To stay within these guidelines, be aware of any casual conversations at the beginning of the interview. Questions on general topics such as the weather are fine to include, always taking care not to approach a protected category. If an approved question is asked and the resulting answer is not thorough enough for the committee, appropriate follow-up questions like, "Can you expand on that?" are permitted. Refrain from asking a new question that is not on the approved list. We've discussed how the committee works to identify ideal qualifications and what questions they will ask to those qualifications. The document that is used to gather the responses is the applicant screening form found on page 15 of the hiring guidelines. For round 1 phone interviews, only 1 sheet per committee will need to be completed by the hiring manager to document the findings. For face-to-face interviews, each committee member will complete a sheet for each candidate. The applicant screening form is intended to be the single document created by committee members during the interview process that captures all the strengths, weaknesses, and other information that differentiates candidates in an objective way. As this form is completed, verify that no documentation exists in protected classifications. If an applicant chooses to self-disclose information about a protected category, this information should not be documented. The documentation should be very robust and complete so that you have captured all of the relevant comments on the job-related behaviors. This document will go forward with the search committee documentation to justify the offering of the position to the chosen applicant. Going back to the mechanics of the selection process, your hiring administrator will give you instructions on how many potential candidates that you will need to identify from the entire pool of applicants. Remember, all members look at all candidates. At no time should you list any ranking, such as number 1, 2, or 3 of individuals. For positions covered under the SEIU CBA, other considerations for selecting candidates is covered in a later session. A committee may decide to use a first-round telephone interview to narrow the applicant pool. This is an optional step in the process. If you have applicants that are working at CCAC and phone interviews are used, all applicants must be treated in an equitable manner. This means that all applicants must be interviewed on the phone. Again, 1 applicant screening form needs to be completed per telephone interview. For face-to-face interviews, equitable process are intentional. If 1 applicant cannot make a face-to-face meeting, a virtual interview format like Link or Skype can be used as a substitute. The important consideration is that all applicants must be interviewed using the same mode, either all in person or all virtual. A separate question list will be used for face-to-face interviews other than the one used for phone interviews. Another consideration of the interview process is the time frame of the hiring process. Searches that take weeks to conclude may lose qualified candidates due to the candidates taking jobs at other employers or other issues. The ability for a search committee to meet and move the process forward in a timely fashion is a key element to the successful search. Once the interviews are concluded, the members will give their completed applicant screening forms to the hiring administrator for review. During the face-to-face interview, all candidates should complete and sign the background check form. While the only check which will be required to do is on the successful candidate, it is necessary to have a signed form for the process. All unused signed forms will be destroyed. Questions about the background check process may arise. Even if a candidate indicates that they have current clearances, HR still needs the forms to be completed for other background check components. At this point of the process, for searches using a 1-stage process, the hiring administrator will choose a successful candidate, check the professional references provided. Additional references can be submitted on the reference check form. As previously covered, the hiring administrator writes a letter of recommendation and includes all completed applicant screening forms for all interview candidates, both the first and second round, reference check form, assigned background check form, and other necessary documentation, and they forward the whole thing to the HR department. For 2-stage process searches, the process continues, and you can learn more about those in a following session. Your committee may find that no candidate is a good match with or a valuable addition to the position in question and our CCAC community as a whole. If this occurs, contact HR for suggestions on how to form a new recruitment plan prior to reposting the position. Many searches are advertised as open until filled, with a closing date. If directed by the hiring administrator, the committee can return to the website, download any applications submitted after the cutoff date. If you have any questions about this process, please review any of this course or contact the Director of Human Resources. To review, in this session we covered the board-approved policy, the steps taken by CCAC to attract, identify, and hire well-qualified and diverse candidates, the applicant screening form, and other documentation used in the process. Thank you again for being a part of the search process. Please continue to the next session to continue the course.